Hello and welcome to the Skift Meetings podcast. I'm Skift Meetings Editor-in-Chief Miguel Neves, and today we're taking a deep dive into two of our own events that are coming up in September, the Skift Global Forum and the Skift Meetings Forum. And to do that, we're joined today by Brian Quinn, our Vice President of Editorial Events.
Hey there, it's Seth Borko, the head of Skift Research, and I've got a brand new report that I want to share with you today. It's called our State of Travel 2024 report. It's perhaps the single most comprehensive report we do every year, and the best part, it's free to download right now. We have 350 plus insights in this report with pretty much a chart for basically any sector. Do you need a chart on hotels? We've got that. A chart on airlines? We've got it. A chart on consumer behavior? Guess what? We've got that too. I really appreciate if you check out our State of Travel report. You can download it now by going to skift.com/state of travel with dashes between every word. So that's skift.com/state-of-travel. Download the report, check it out, and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy.
Hey Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey Miguel, good to see you.
First, a little housekeeping. Don't forget to follow, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. If you enjoy the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave a positive review so we can spread the word about the Skift Meetings podcast. And if you have a moment, share it with your friends and colleagues. And with that out of the way, Brian, you've been working on the Skift Global Forum for how long now?
Well, with Skift, I've been 5 years, and this forum certainly since the last one ended. So yeah, it's always the biggest event of the year.
Okay, biggest event of the year. I think Skift does how many live events throughout the year now?
About 10 to 12. They go across the world. This was the first year that we did an event in India, and that was fascinating. It was also my first time producing an event in India. So always pushing the boundaries. Next year we'll also hold more events. And lots of big and small events.
Yeah, one in the Middle East as well, quite a big one. We've done ones in Europe as well, so all over the world, all sorts of different places and topics as well, all around travel, of course.
Yep.
So let's talk about this big event, the Skift Global Forum, happening 17th to 19th of September. For people that aren't familiar with the Skift Global Forum, can you just give us a little bit of an overview? I mean, the audience are familiar with events and familiar with planning events, but what is it? What is the Skift Global Forum specifically?
Sure. So I guess what's novel about Skift Global Forum, even within the scope of global events, not just the world of the business of travel, which we focus on. This started about 11 years ago. Skift Global Forum kind of came out of the box as a challenger event. Since its inception, it was always about the future of travel, cutting edge, being different, and it carved out this niche through journalism, through having a unique point of view and building that community and audience together that also shared that desire to talk about things either in a more frank and provocative way or honest way, and also pushing the industry forward. So that's always been the promise of Skift Global Forum, is that we are there to help push the industry forward. We also do that through our editorial coverage. I mean, tens of thousands of articles on our site, and so that's an enormous resource. Of course, we work with our editors, and our research teams produce reports. They just produced a 400-page State of Travel report. So there's so much there, and then the event, especially Skift Global Forum, is almost this manifestation when the entire company comes together, and that's it is this kind of representation of all of Skift and the passion that we bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to me like in practical sense. It's a 3-day event. I guess it's like a full day, a half day of education, and then a kind of half day evening before that.
Yeah, it looks on paper like a 3-day event, but really, I in a sense, it's a day and a half of an intense event. And now we have an opening event an opening night party where we have more programming. So it's about 900 people, 1,000, something like that, kind of floats around that. But so it's not a huge event, but it's all leaders in travel. And so they come together. What we're known for is our CEO conversations. And you look at our website and it's all CEO of Airbnb is now coming back every year. Booking Holdings, major, major companies, not only within travel but technology, Uber, Marriott, hotel CEOs, airline CEOs. And so it's interesting to bring all of these different respective industries together, and that's that together comprise what we call travel. But it's sometimes what these industries are quite siloed, and we try to look at it in a more holistic way. And our editors and research analysts engage in really kind of thoughtful and thought-provoking conversations on stage with these leaders, often pushing the envelope, maybe even beyond certainly what they're sometimes comfortable with. And that's part of the energy in the room, and that's what's great. So across those 3 days, yeah, we have a lot of activities going on. A lot of it really is about the stage, though, and that's kind of what makes, I guess, Skift Global Forum unique, or Skift's approach to events, in a sense that we go against some of the rest of the industry in terms of really trying to push all these other facets sometimes, because we really focus on the story as the driver of a lot of what we do.
Okay. Let me unpack a couple of things there. So we have the Skift Global Forum, about 900 to 1,000 people. It's one stage, right? It's a one stage event. There's
Yeah,
no breakouts. And that is quite intentional, right?
very much. It's a single stage event, and right, there's so much thought process that goes into that, and that is very much intentional. And I mean, in the future we might try to experiment with more, but it creates this unified experience with the audience, and that also impacts what we do and what we think about for other facets of the event. I guess originally at one point people had kind of dubbed it the TED Talks of travel, which I guess also represents that single stage experience. So that's a bit of the lineage of how we got to there.
Yeah. And you mentioned the CEO interviews. I mean, I've seen, yeah, like you said, Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, on stage. I've seen him. I think this will be my fourth time this year, I guess. And this is an individual that's worth 12 point something $billion on paper, at least. I mean, let's talk a little bit about how you get these people there in the first place, and then how do you get to actually have these honest conversations with them? Because that, in my mind, is quite unique. I don't see a lot of events able to do this.
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, and there's obviously so much that leads up to it in the process. Having those relationships through the journalism side is, of course, crucial. That creates this trust not only with the speakers that we bring in, but with our audience. And really, it's a lot of negotiation, some persuasion, and we want to make sure that, of course, that when the speakers come to us, they know, and the speaker teams, they know that we are going to be we're going to bring our own unique perspective to the conversation, that it's not going to just be reading a press release on stage. So they know that in the interaction that we're going to be honest and fair in our interviews, but also uncover the problems that whether a CEO like Chesky, if whether a person worth $12 billion or whatever, they've created this company, but they're still trying to solve some of these core problems that so much of the industry also has in front of them. So that's what's the unifier, and it we don't just kind of make it about the person either. It's really about this thing that we call travel and the bigger picture, and what everyone else in the room can benefit from hearing on that, or thinking about new strategies. And so we do spend a lot of time really creating a lot of nuance around the topic, the arc of that conversation, the assets that we show, the images that we show on stage, and how that it's in my mind, it sometimes gets borderlines into like a, I don't want to call it a performance, but it has that kind of emotive element when all these pieces come together: the education, the insights, the subject, the person you're doing the kind of interplay with the moderator, and that kind of mystique and surprise and delight of like what's going to happen on stage. So we put a lot of thought into it, probably more than most companies, or any company that I've seen. So, but I do think it actually shows, and it's a signal for the rest of the event, and helps drive why people come back year over year.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me, the way you describe it, that I've worked in a number of different events. Obviously, we've been Skift for 3 and something years. But One thing that I think Skift does differently, and let me know if I'm talking out of turn, is that a lot of companies will have big events, big stages, and they'll work very tightly with a production company. They'll prepare the slides, they'll prepare the presentations, they'll do that things. But then when it comes to actually the content on stage, that's kind of left up to the presenter. Or, there's sort of like a gap there, and it feels to me that you're going much deeper into that. So it's not like you're scripting every moment because it's an interview, right? But you are very careful about the arch, like say that you said, that kind of conversation, where the conversation goes, how it develops. That's all something that you're considering very closely. Is that, you think, the thing that really sets Skift Global Forum or Skift events apart?
Sure. Yeah, I think it is. And it's also a necessity by having a single stage. If we had, and I've produced these kind of festivals and events before where we have multiple different stages, you just simply have to let each of those people driving the conversation on stage self, you know, self-regulate in terms of the quality of their discussion. And you try to push them forward and instill these ideas as much as you can. But yeah, I guess I think there's a fine line. We're not trying to tell people what to say on stage ever. That's not our goal. What we're trying to do is craft their story and work with them in a collaborative way to make sure that story is best told either in an interview format, which is a fireside chat is kind of a lot of what we're known for, and it's a very kind of personal, in-depth format. Um, Even if it's a panel, we really think about that choreography between the different speakers, and it's not just this kind of going down the line of these very generic questions. Um, we want to read for what the audience will want to hear, and also making sure that if we think that they're going to fall asleep, why would we ever put that on stage? So we're very intentional about that, and I think that thoughtfulness. Um, you know, I guess one thing that's interesting is we hear a lot about this talk about you can't just do events like you did before the pandemic. Everything's changed. You can't just sort of you need to think about things in a new way. Part of what I hear there is that you can't hide and just sort of allow things to just happen and not have the care and thoughtfulness that allows something to really be well presented. You need to put more energy into it, and it goes back to these core principles of what people want out of an event. And there's still parts of it I think that are cyclical, but I think what Skift does and why some of our events, in some ways, resemble a bit of what we did before the pandemic is because we've never let go of that quality. There's still other pieces to it that create the picture, but that stage-driven quality and the audience, surprisingly, often to me, very much. I guess you could think of it almost like obedient. Like it's like everyone's just coming back into the room at the end of the networking break and sitting right down and joining. They're right there for the next conversation. Well, it's because they know that that's where the action is, and that's how that drives then what they're going to discuss in the networking break, things like that. So it is really interesting, the kind of permission asset that we have with our audience and the ability to drive it from that story perspective.
Yeah, fascinating. I wrote a post recently on LinkedIn about this idea of having kind of attendees that sort of float in and out of sessions, and then you have these dedicated participants that kind of sit and kind of consume everything. Do you feel that this format kind of attracts the best of both worlds in a way, because it is a single stage, right? So if you want to step outside, take a call, if you have to do a meeting, you can do that, right? But you can also just be there and absorb and kind of have that kind of experience that everybody has together. Is that kind of an important consideration when you're thinking about that attendee engagement?
Well, I guess I'll say I don't design for the people that are walking out of the room taking a phone call.
Nobody does, right? But unfortunately, it happens, right? Like even when we're at an
Yeah,
event, it happens sometimes, right?
yeah. Well, so because it is such a tight format, it looks like it's 3 days, but again, it's really just a day and a half of really high octane. A lot of stuff happening. 20 to 30 sessions. Which most of our discussions are very short, 20, 30 minutes. Well, no, actually, even 20, 25. We keep getting shorter and shorter because we recognize, and just like the day and a half timing of the, most of the content itself, that people's time is precious. And I think we frame things in that way. So even if a leader, from the industry comes and they can only make the first day, they're going to get a tremendous amount out of that. But I think they recognize that they should not be sitting there on their phone taking calls, because what's the point? They're going to miss it. And what I see, I guess, with events that have that behavior is that it's because the people recognize people are pretty savvy, and they see quickly, like, oh, this is not really worth my time. And oh, this is, nobody's people are not discussing anything interesting on stage, or this is not helpful to me. So yeah, I think that goes both ways. It's not just that people naturally come to conferences to take meetings and calls externally, but they want to, for us, at least for the Skift Global Forum audience, they come because they have a passion about this subject, and they want to connect with other passionate people and think about the different catalysts that these ideas on stage present. So it's not everybody in the room, but I think that's largely who we design for.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understanding of the Skift Global Forum audience, it's a very kind of investor audience. It's a very kind of engaged in the industry audience, which I think at some other events, if you weren't able to really capture their attention, they could easily be, doing business the whole time they're at the event, right? There's all this kind of like deal making going on, but yet you manage to capture them. And like you say, they come back in the room and they sit down and they kind of trust that your curation of the speakers, etc., will keep them engaged. How do you think about these like ever fleeting attention spans? You mentioned the sessions being shorter. Is that intentional? Is that something that you really kind of want to go in that direction?
I definitely think about attention spans, and when we, for example, work with a speaker, even if it's a presentation or editorial, fireside chat, we want to get to those kind of those nuggets at the end. The big ideas that they discuss that are how would I say this? We want to get to the part that's the big picture, message of what they're sharing, not like the origin story of their company, not all of these like long-winded other perspectives. So,
are you tired of sifting through endless resumes looking for the perfect candidate to fill a leadership opening? Skift Executive Search can help. We have an insider view of the travel industry and can leverage both our expertise and connections to find your next rockstar hire. To learn more, visit skift.com/exec-search or email us at execsearch@skift.com.
Yeah, for designing for attention, I mean, we definitely think about shorter formats in a way of saying, how can we get to the heart of the conversation as fast as possible? And when we work with our speakers, even for a solo presentation or a fireside chat, we really try to get them to leave behind the long-winded bio or who I am or how the origin story of our company. None of that. Like, we assume that there's a lot of table stakes in the room. People understand the subject matter. They're smart. They can research it later if they need to, but that you want to give them the really heart of that strategy. So who's attending? We used to say there was like people, we had this MST phrase, which was marketers, strategists, and technologists. And I think marketing or that kind of understanding of people and strategies, also understanding people. And then of course the shifts in technology still drive a lot of, what the people want from what the audience wants from these conversations on stage. And of course they're self-interested. How does this apply to my job? How does this apply to the work that I'm doing? So by Skift coming up with these concepts and saying, okay, editorially, we think XYZ is going to be the future big trend here in travel. Let's discuss that with a CEO and also have other multifaceted pieces around that, our research, our editorial. In the event itself, it's not like that manifests in the pre-function or the networking spaces necessarily. It could, in the future, but for the most part, we allow the attendees to kind of self-select and engage in those conversations and figure out what they want to talk about. But so we don't try to dictate everything. We try to have that kind of, I guess it's, a little bit of tension or highly programmed pieces, and then release, or there's things that are unprogrammed, like networking to some degree, sometimes intentionally. Sometimes you need to give the brain a break. So I guess as a programmer for the stage, I think about all of these different cadences for sure, and even throughout the day, how I space or put different conversations back to back. Like it all has an intention, and it's not always perfect, and some of it's an experiment. And we always want to also try to continue to experiment with new formats. But yeah, that's what we try to do as much as we can with that single stage and the audience size we have. Um, but this is what's great. You have Skift Meetings Forum now on the first day of the forum. So I get to turn the tables on you, Miguel, and say, you have a smaller audience, 200 people. What are you doing to engage in that audience attention span and do, an event for event planners and people that that are important to that industry? Like, how are you shaking that up or thinking about it for Meetings Forum?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of what we're doing is taking a page from what you're doing. So, we're doing the CEO interviews. We are keeping the same format. We are also single stage. We're actually in the same stage this year. So, it'll be nice to share that stage in some ways. So, we're actually preceding the Skift Global Forum. So, very much the same format. We've had a couple of really high end CEOs that we're going to interview. Reggie Agarwal from Cvent and Ben Irwin from Encore, both like 5,000 to 7,000 person companies. So looking forward to that. I guess the equivalent, if you will, in the meetings industry. We have a few panels, all timely topics, stories that we've been writing about, etc. I think the one area that we're doing slightly differently is we're keeping these two sections of the program. They're about 25 minutes, and they're just after some really thought-provoking sessions, and we're calling them the comparing notes sessions. And the idea here is to actually have the audience connect with each other. I think we're trying to kind of say, look, it's not very common for corporate or association planners to speak to each other. You're kind of involved within one organization, in usually a relatively small department within an organization, and to actually speak to people from other companies and get ideas and kind of understand the problems, the challenges they're facing, what they're going through. So we tried to kind of carve out this space in the program where we let people literally just compare notes, literally talk to each other and have conversations. So the way we're structuring that is we're getting some key takeaways from these sessions that are proceeding. We're looking at some big questions that they're asking, and we're then just going to ask the audience to connect with each other and share experiences around those topics. And then we'll get some ideas back from the audience. We'll have a few minutes at the end to kind of like get some report outs from each of the tables. I mean, they're kind of sitting in round tables, so the idea is to kind of connect with each other. But we do this at the Innovation Lab, which is an event we do at IMEX America, a small event as well, around 100 people. And it's really hard to get people to stop talking, right? Because we're trying to feed all this fresh input, these interviews, these panels, and I think hopefully people's minds are going to be bubbling, and then sharing that, and really almost sometimes just repeating what they think they heard and then hearing what somebody else thought they heard. Sometimes is really interesting, because when you compare what you thought was really interesting from the stage, sometimes is quite different. So I think that's the main difference, and hopefully it's something that people will appreciate. And it's also a little bit of a break, right? Because if you have a lot of kind of sessions coming from the stage, having a little bit of a time to speak a little bit and hear people at close range and sort of more intimate conversations, hopefully that'll mix up the energy a little bit and give us different energy in the room, I think is something we're really going for.
That's great. It'll be exciting to see that. And I mean, I'm certainly a little bit jealous too, because the ability to have those workshop style formats, or I guess take advantage of what I always think about, which is the audience. The people sitting in the room are sometimes um, just as incredible, and the ideas they have are just as valid and insightful as the people on stage. And we just don't have enough room to put everyone on stage. That's the issue. So the thing, giving people agency and allowing the audience in the room to really participate in that way and share ideas. And I guess what would be the next step is, how do you unearth that, either on stage within the event or in the kind of long tail afterwards? But how do you capture that and show the breadth of what happens? I guess that's the one thing that I would love to see more of, even for Skift Global Forum, is to say, imagine if we could capture all of the conversations and amazing ideas that were shared in the room off the back of this talk, because the talk is just the catalyst in the beginning of that conversation. So that's great to see. Yeah, it'll be So that'll be September 17th, and you're doing
17th, about
6
8:30 in the
hours.
morning to 4 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. So we'll be before the actual
Also a
evening.
jam-packed agenda. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to go back a little bit to strategy. Skift and Skift Meetings as well, and Airline Weekly, etc., do a number of virtual events. And not that I'm comparing Skift Global Forum to a virtual event, but in terms of kind of the overall strategy, you could have these high-level speakers speak to editors at a virtual event. You could do a 2-day virtual event, although nobody really does 2-day virtual events anymore. But how do you see those things being really different? And what's really the magic that you're seeing about being in that room and being there in person?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the kind of pendulum swing back after the pandemic has, I guess, even been surprising to me that nobody cared. Maybe it's just that we just stay all are on video too much, anyways. Um, that people really wanted to be in the room with each other, and that's there. I guess the pandemic brought this wonderful opportunity to explore that medium, and we did. We did so much. I guess delving into broadcast journalism even, and really thinking about those stories, and it helped us hone a lot of the craft and what we do for now our physical events going forward, and kind of the digital components or the design. There was a lot there that we learned, but virtual events, if we can even call them that anymore, or I don't know what what does that really consist of? But for me, I see it as, again, I go back to the story, and it's like, how much can this conversation be? How much do I want to listen to this conversation? Our founder, Rafat Ali, and CEO, he recently had this posit that there's a behavioral change between audio and video and our interactions, and that we're becoming perhaps more ubiquitous, and that this interplay, that's why Spotify, I guess, is adding video for podcasts, things like that. So this there's a behavioral change in terms of we're becoming more agnostic. So I would like to see the virtual events be a part of the longer tail or the lead up or whatever, the things that provide some scene setting, even for um, I guess it's not window dressing, but it's things that happen around the big physical event. And for me, it's another way for us to kind of let the community know, here's the signals of what we're going to be creating, and maybe even some call to actions to, here's what we want to hear from you. So for me, it is a part of the larger picture, but it's been hard to see that it has enough energy behind it to kind of exist on its own in the same way that physical events present all of these different opportunities. So I guess that's the over under I see at this time. I mean, I would love for it to continue to change, and digital physical to the worlds will continue to collide, but I think we've reverted to the mean for the most part now.
Makes sense. Last question for you, and hopefully kind of sum it up nicely. How do you tell if your work and the global forum has been successful?
Well, there are data points, and then there's a lot of non-data points. Um, Going back to my origin in the music industry, so I kind of came into this career in a weird way, coming from producing concerts. It really is sometimes for me the energy in the room, and an example would be like in music, we would have this thing called a pin drop moment, where the whole audience, you can feel the audience just hush. And the idea is, of course, literally you could hear a pin drop. And in a performance, that's you get the goosebumps, you have this emotion. I live for those moments. I love that. And I love seeing that in an event, even if we're talking about, obviously even a somewhat dry, topic, but it's about that magic all coming together. So for me, there is the sort of, you can't really always measure it through data, but the magic in the room and the attendees and the conversations you have after the event, and have you struck the right tone in terms of what everybody's thinking and feeling, and how can you use the event as a platform to open up some of those ideas um, and connections. And then, of course, there's sentiment afterwards, and getting insights as far as what people wanted to see and improve. And I've also been surprised there, where it's the feedback, there somebody's experience can be completely different from what I thought it was in that moment. So not all of it is valid, and that's what's great. And so, you know, uh, for me, defining success in this, you really have to kind of look at balancing all of these different factors. What did we set out to do? What's the kind of multi-year scope of the growth of this event and what it means for the industry and the people that we're serving? How are we, in a sense, being of service in creating this event for this community? So I guess those are all of the bigger picture things. And of course, there's very obvious ones like revenue and and the ticket sales and how, and people coming back year over year, and did we fulfill that promise? So I think for me, the quality, the intention of what we do helps underscore, and people feel it, that we've delivered. But again, we're always competing with ourselves, so we're always saying, how are we going to change the next year or improve it or make investments or take chances so that we can continue to push those boundaries and yes, the industry forward.
Brian, thank you so much for talking with us today. If you're not familiar with the Skift Meetings Forum, September 17th, or the Skift Global Forum, September 17th and 19th, make sure you check them out. And hopefully we'll be having a nice conversation after both of these events over an alcoholic beverage or not. And we'll be talking about how great they were. So looking forward to that later in September.
Thank you, Miguel. Always great to see you. And we'll look forward to hanging out in September.
All right. Thank you very much. Hey there, if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. That really helps us get out the word about the Skift Meetings podcast and make sure that we can continue to bring you this podcast every week absolutely free of charge. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.
Want to reach the most influential audience in travel? SkiftX helps brands solve problems, create unforgettable moments, and communicate big ideas through content, research, and event activations. Learn more about how we can help you at skiftx.com.